Welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast, the show dedicated to celebrating female entrepreneurs' strength, resilience, and innovation. Be inspired by stories of women and what they cherish to help them conquer against all odds. Every other week, you will learn from remarkable women on how they navigate challenges, uphold their values, and create sustainable success. And now, here's your host, Jim Rembach.
Hello and welcome to the Cherish and Conquer podcast. I have somebody who's on the show today who has a wealth of experience and has written a lot of books. And I'm looking forward to this conversation because the one that I had with her a few years ago on the Fast Leader Show podcast was, absolutely filled with wisdom and nuggets. And I have Dianna Booher on the show. Dianna, welcome.
Thank you, Jim. Great to be with you again.
So we're going to talk about something that people need, regardless of whether you're a solopreneur, small business, in an organization. And ladies must have a personal presence that allows them to get the things accomplished that they want to get accomplished, whatever that might be. So Donna, on the book, you talk about look, talk, think, and act like a leader. So if you could share a little bit about one thing first, and that is, how many books do you actually have at this point?
Well, I've written 50 under my own name, and then I've done some ghostwriting for a few executives and, a few other compilations, but I just say 50.
Over 50 books. Okay. So
you've got to do something. You've got to do something, Jim, missing all those airplanes, sitting in those hotel rooms, right?
Well, that's true. And so I actually want to get an update on, where you are now with all of that. Because we had talked about some shifts and changes from, COVID, and I think that's important. But if you could, when we start thinking about how you're making a difference in people's lives today with this work specifically, kind of share with us how that is actually occurring.
Well, basically what I'm doing now, after writing 50 books, I've decided, hey, I'm boring myself. Let me switch gears and help other people get their message out. So what I'm really focusing on is coaching people who really either they want personally to get to the executive suite, or they want to sell to somebody in the executive suite. And so they need that personal presence. I don't care what job, what industry. You need to have credibility, that you are credible, you're authoritative, you know what you're talking about. So I can either do that with helping them be a better communicator, delivering a better presentation, or writing their own book. So I'm coaching, I think it was a Wall Street Journal article not too long ago that said 80% of the population says they have a book inside and they want to get that book out. So I'm really taking that to heart and helping other people get their message out in book form.
Okay. So needless to say, there's a lot that goes into that. And I think the joke always kind of goes along the lines of, too, is that writing the book is the easy part.
It's absolutely the easy part.
Yeah. And yet everybody talks about how difficult it is and how long it takes to write a book, but it's like, wait a minute, that's the easy part.
Right. And particularly when I'm coaching people, because I do give them a system to get it done in a month. And I'm not talking about research. They might be writing on their personal experience that has occurred over 20 years, or they may have done extensive research. But once they get ready to write it, they really can write it in about 7 to 30 days. So it really, literally, that's a true cliche that you hear. That's the easy part, is writing the book, but it's getting the word out about it, delivering presentations on it, doing the media tour, marketing in the bazillion ways there are to market a book. And so all of that really makes or breaks the effort.
Well, and I think when you start talking about all of that, this presence, is critical in every single step and stage. So if you can, tell us a little bit about look, talk, think, and act like a leader, and for women, how that's so important.
Well, basically, the way I came up with those 4 buckets, I would say, of characteristics, traits, attitudes, etc. When I started speaking on this more than 3 decades ago, I asked audiences. I would be in front of 5,000 people, and I would say, get in a group of 10 and tell me what's your list of things that make someone sound credible to you, that give them an executive presence. and people would call out 30 or 40 different things. But what I discovered quickly is that they all fell into those 4 buckets. It's either how you look when they first meet you, how you talk, how you express yourself, either persuasively, not persuasively, just the language you use, your spacing, that kind of thing. And then how you think. When you're at spur of the moment, you're in a crisis situation, do you organize your thinking so that it's logical and it's persuasive when you express yourself? And then the last bucket, and by the way, those first 3, look, talk, and think, you can teach somebody. They can learn those things. But the last one, how you act, you can't teach somebody in a matter of, even a few months or a few years, because that's based on values. It's based on a track record of success for years. It's personality traits, integrity, things like that. And so I don't even try to coach on that unless somebody has, a specific question. But you can help someone appear to be credible, appear to be approachable, appear to be pleasant, to have power. All of that comes across in the way you, let's just talk about the first one for a moment, the way you look. And I'm not talking about being attractive or not, or how you dress, but I'm talking about your movements, your gestures, your posture, how you walk, how you shake hands. All of those give somebody in 10 seconds or 15 seconds an impression. This person has self-confidence. This person knows what they're talking about. And then they either decide you do or you don't. And if you don't, they think, why listen? If they don't believe in what they say, they don't have confidence in what they say, why even listen? So that one is extremely important, as are the others.
Okay. As you're sitting here and you're walking through and talking and explaining all of those, I start thinking about something that I think women often, find some struggles with. And, we refer to and hear about imposter syndrome, right? And so it's like, okay, wait a minute. If you're sitting here, I have to look, talk and think, in a certain way in order for me to be able to, have the impact that I want. Isn't that causing me to become an imposter or have this imposter problem?
I find just the opposite. I think that for the women that I've worked with through the years, many of them, they come across in what they consider an imposter way. This is not me. My job is to coach them to become their natural self. I'm not teaching them to be somebody that they're not. What I'm coaching them to do is to find out what their key strengths are. For example, someone may be really good at, off the top of their head, witty remarks. Well, sometimes they would think, well, I need to tone that down. That's not really an, quote, executive. That's not professional. And I would say, no, if that is a key strength of yours, use it. Use it for a purpose. Use it for effect. So I'm coaching people not to be their unnatural self. And what happens is when let's say they're calling on a customer and they're calling on a key prospect for their organization, and they tend to have a set thing in their mind of how they should be perceived, how they should walk, how they should dress, etc. And what I'm saying is, think about how you are when you're after work, you're out with colleagues, you're having dinner on Tuesday night. How animated are you? What kind of stories do you like to tell? Are you witty? What kind of expression do you have on your face? And most people are very naturally animated. They're very engaging. They tell great stories. They're great conversationalists. And so my job often is just to get them to be those things in front of a group and ditch all those ideas of what makes them more professional, etc.
Well, as you say that, I would dare to say if I'm going through a modified set and I'm not, that is actually going to potentially diminish my presence because I won't step into it. I won't have essentially the chin up and the chest out and, the shoulders pinned back. And, so, that kind of makes sense when you explain and walk it through that way. But then I start, thinking about one of the things that, I talk about is I spend most of my time just undoing stuff instead of actually, helping, to develop and move new things forward. It's like, no, why are you doing that? Get rid of that. So when you start thinking about creating personal presence and those 3 buckets and all that, I start going to thinking, oh my gosh, you probably have to undo more than you have to think about actually doing.
Well, that will foul you up. When you're always thinking about, don't do this. Like when I tell somebody, you're saying you have too many filler words. You're saying, okay, right, etc. every sentence. Then they start focusing on that and thinking on that. So what I have to coach them to do is to, every time you are searching for the next word, just pause. It sounds fine to just pause. So what their mind now is going on, what do I need to do, not what I shouldn't do. And that principle applies to a lot of things, whether it's, planning a project or finishing some goal or whatever, going after a key client that you're intimidated really maybe to reach out to. Think about, this is what I want to do. This is the goal, rather than don't make this mistake, don't make that mistake, don't do this, because that will mess you up. That will play with your mind.
Well, and I think that's one of those untaught and unemphasized skill development opportunities. Is, I mean, and it's based in psychology. So if you say don't before something, you're actually reinforcing what it is you're saying don't to. So, like, think about it from the kids. Don't go in the street. What'd you just tell them? Go in the street.
And people say that. I hear women say that frequently about a bad relationship with their mom. I just don't want to be like my mom. I told myself I'd never grow up and be like my mom. I just don't want to do that. I've seen her to say that to dad, and I don't want to do that. Well, what do? They turn out just like their mom, because that's what they've been programming themselves to do. Right. They're focusing on that negative that they want to avoid. So whether you're giving a presentation, writing a book, or whatever, think about, this is what I want to do. This is my goal in writing this or delivering the presentation. Not, be careful that you don't. Be careful that you don't do this.
Want more insights from female entrepreneurs? Get complimentary access to Marina's Army for additional tips, tools, and tactics from this episode. Just go to Mirina.ai and click Community for access. Now, let's get back to the conversation.
So I would dare to say that if I was to go through and think about those particular buckets of look, talk, and think, there's got to be one that has a bigger opportunity associated with it. Which ones of those do you think it would be?
I think the bigger opportunity, of course, is the one think. Look, talk, think, and act like a leader. Because the act part, again, you've been developing that over your life. It's very hard to modify those things. But thinking through a problem, analyzing, and being able to synthesize a lot of information and summarize it succinctly is a difficult skill for most people. They either lean one way or the other. They talk through, and women have been accused of this. I think the research also bears it out. They tend to talk through an issue before they come to conclusion. It's how they make decisions. Men, on the other hand, tend to just blurt out something and then back up and think, well, do I really think that? Is that really true in all situations? And then they're willing to change their mind. If evidence shows that to be a false conclusion they've just drawn or a false assumption, they'll back up and change their mind. But women tend to start at the beginning and go chronologically. Here are the pros, here's a con, but here's another drawback, but here's an advantage, and it's wishy-washy. That's good thinking to see all sides. But when you get ready to speak, you want to speak in a more structured way so that you start off with the conclusion. Here's what I think. Here's my answer to that situation. Here's the update on that project or whatever it is, in a very succinct summary statement. So I guess if I were going to boil that down, I'd say a good way to remember that would be to do your thinking offline. And I'm not talking literally about online in the computer sense, but do your thinking offline, quietly in your brain. And then as you speak, put your message up front. This is what I believe. I want you to know, do, consider, buy, etc. And then back up and give supporting information.
Okay. I think we need to dig into that a little bit deeper, because there's when we start thinking about that skill development and when we start thinking about ideation and creative thinking, there, so and like you said, okay, let's use with what you take with what you have and try to make it and turn it into even greater positive and impact. Is that if I am the type of person, and I've seen some guys like this too, they like to ideate their thoughts, and they like to verbalize it, and they kind of have to hear themselves thinking, and that's a good thing if you start allowing other people to engage in it. Now, I've had certain people that like to ideate, and then when they're doing that, you're assuming because you're an audience of them that they're looking for other ideas and thoughts in the process. But then when you start interjecting that, they're like, "Don't interrupt me."
Right. Maybe they weren't clear or they haven't made it clear to the group. I want your feedback. I need you to engage. Or if they don't, then it should just be given FYI, here's the information, and then let's go on to something else. That the problem, the conflicts that develop in relationships is when you're not clear about
Right.
what you expect from the other person. They're not clear. So it seems like either you're very approachable and you're wishy-washy and you need everybody else to make up your mind for you, or it seems like you're closed to any other new ideas.
Right. And I think that's where the power comes into play, is to be able to explain to people, okay, so I like to, for example, you would say and preface things and say, I'm the type of person who likes to kind of talk ideas out. I said, but I need time for me to do it myself before I can actually have you interject into it. So give me a minute and I'm going to talk out loud, but don't interrupt me. And then when I finish, then I'll be open to your, thoughts and ideas. I
Yes.
think you have to understand you and how you can get the most out of you. And that's, to me, one of the examples on the way you can do that. Because if we were to say totally keep it inside all the time, I think you would potentially squash your opportunities. But it's doing it in the right venue, in the right place, and with the right audience. I think that's the key.
Right, and the right framework.
Yeah.
In a way, a doctor that I've coached quite a bit through the years uses this. She will say something like, I'm trying to make this decision and I've thought about this and this, and I see this as a drawback. I really don't see any obstacles. What am I missing here? And so by that phrase, I love that phrase. She used that very frequently. What am I missing here? You're saying I'm inviting feedback. I just say it once you start to do a formal presentation and you're trying to, quote, persuade somebody to change their mind or change their heart or do something, then you want to put that offline. You want to start off, this is what I'm asking you to do. This is the message. We're way behind in our projects this quarter by at least 10 days. And what I suggest that we do to improve the meeting our deadlines is blah, blah, blah. But that interaction that you want, that input on a new system, a new idea, new equipment should come prior to that. So those are really two different kinds of ways to interact or communicate. One is for feedback, and that's the purpose. And the other is to sell somebody, persuade somebody on an idea.
I think the part that I oftentimes have a little bit of chuckle with is when you have a person that I just, explained how they like to have their ideas out in the cloud so they can hear themselves talk. They don't want other people to interact with them. They get upset when people interrupt them, and all of that. But then they say they're open to new ideas and things like that. And then they call themselves a great communicator.
They're misguided in many ways with that. I think that we need both to come up with the superior decision, the superior action. We need that feedback. We need to be able to bounce ideas. And then we also need to know how to sell an idea, to sell a new approach, to persuade people. And I don't mean coming across like a used car salesperson, just overwhelming people and trying to put them down. But there is a way to structure your presentation that makes it a good deal of difference. And also just the language that you use. There's a difference between being passionate about a topic and showing your confidence that this is the right approach and being, hyper cheerleader over the top, or being too meek and mild. They're degrees of how you persuade and what I call tone. And in fact, I'm just writing an article for Forbes now, and one of the key points is that mistake that we make is to temper our tone by that purposefully trying to tone down, whether it's excitement or confidence or enthusiasm for something. And that's really the wrong approach, because if you don't have confidence in what you're saying, you're not sold on this new idea, this new approach, this new service, etc., your listeners won't be either.
That's very true. I have come across research where it talks about tone and cadence could actually have a greater impact on the sales outcome than the information that was shared within it.
Right. Because most people now have already done their research when they come to you. I know in sales, they tell us the customer's already gone online, they've looked it up, they've compared prices, and they need you to guide them through the information. And I think when I was writing Creating Personal Presence, I talked a lot about not overwhelming people with, doing a data dump, all these numbers, all these reasons, but instead guiding them to analyze the information that they have available, either that you provided or they've gotten themselves online.
I mean, the reality is today people need the opportunity and you could say the tools necessary in order to be able to draw their own conclusion. And
right,
I
they
think
believe their own data.
That's right.
People believe what they say. And so when you can get them to voice back to you what they believe or intend to do or a problem they have, they believe that as they hear themselves say it far better than believing you, far quicker than believing you.
More so. Okay. So that fourth bucket, act. Now, if I'm doing all this work in regards to look, talk, think differently, I have to assume that it's going to impact the act. Am I wrong?
Well, yes, that your values, your reputation, your track record is sort of a composite of how you do those other things. But there are other things involved. For example, when I'm talking about how you act, I mean how you behave when you're just off stage, you're not in front of other people, you're in a conversation, it's not a formal kind of interaction. That's when they either know that you're approachable or not approachable. They know that you're arrogant or humble. They know that you seem knowledgeable on a lot of different subjects, or you can't even carry on an intelligent conversation. They know that you have humor, you have a sense of humor, or you don't. They learn that you value certain things, or you just dislike intensely certain, whether it's political or whether it's social or issues or whatever. So those things, for the most part, have been developed over a long period of time. And so it's much harder to change those, but they are essence of the first three buckets that I was talking about, the look, talk, and think. Some of those in that act category can be changed. I'll give you an example. I was doing some workshops and consulting work for IBM, and I was doing presentations program at this particular time. And I had a guy, I still remember the guy. He was nice looking. He was about 6'7". He's just really taller than everybody else. So all the physical attributes that should make him persuasive and professional in his appearance. And when he did his first presentation, I had the group to evaluate, and he got very negative comments. And so when we did our one-on-one, he said, why? I thought I just did a perfect job in doing my 5-minute presentation. And I said, you did. And therein is the problem. People can't identify with perfection. I said, you come across as very arrogant in your tone, in your manner, even in your gestures. It's like, I know what's right. You people need to listen to me. And I said, people are going to react very negatively. They just don't relate to that. And so I said, let's do a little experiment. Here's what I'd like for you to do. The next time you do a presentation for this group, I want you to sort of lose your train of thought on purpose and stumble over a word. Say something like, what's the word for, somebody tell me, oh, yes. When somebody helps you with what word you were groping for and they help you, let's just see if that one thing does not make you seem less arrogant. He did that. He did it a couple of times in the presentation, pretended to be searching for a word and then just stumble over a word or two. Immediately, all the evaluations went up. And he said, I made 2 purposeful mistakes and now everybody loves it better. And he said, that's happening to me just on an informal basis, not just when I do presentations here at IBM, but when I'm just anywhere. And I said, it's that perception of arrogance they think that you're a know-it-all because you are so polished, and they can't relate to it. So again, that's an example of a characteristic or a habit or a trait, always wanting to be perfect in everything, that can be modified. If you understand, the result of that and the perception that creates, you can modify that. But then there are many things in that fourth bucket of act that you can't necessarily. For example, values. Maybe, like, let's say in a job, you value staying around your family. You want to start a business, and you want to start this business where your parents, your kids, your grandkids, and that's important to you. And maybe you're married to someone who says, "No, I like traveling. I don't care. We don't need to be by the family. In fact, that's irritating. They'll be over here all the time. I want to just move for the job wherever they promote me." Those are two different values that are often arrived at through many years of experience. And those are the things, the values part of it, that's very tough to change.
That makes sense. And I appreciate you sharing that perspective.
Sure.
So when I start thinking about, you being in business for as long as you have, all the books that you've written, the things that you're doing now, and how you're focusing in on helping others to get their message out. I mean, for me, I want to know, as far as the, inspiring and inspiration and things that have, drawn you to start your own business. How does it align with the concept of cherish and conquer?
Well, what I cherished always is being available to my family, my parents, my kids, my spouse. And so that alignment made me choose a career that was flexible, that I didn't have to be somewhere all the time, that I could control my own schedule. And so I wanted to conquer that world of being a professional speaker and traveling all over the world to speak, and make money, make a lot of money doing that. But I also wanted to continue to cherish the relationships with my family. So I had to figure a way to conquer, to conquer those seemingly totally polar opposites of what you could do, traveling all over the world or staying close to your family. And so that has been my challenge throughout my career. And I think by aligning myself or setting up a career where I could write the books, create all the content, and then turn them into courses that are seminars that other people could go deliver. So I could show up in, South Africa if I want to do this women's conference, or I could stay home and send somebody else. So I built my whole business model around what I wanted to do with my life. And if I never wanted to get on a plane again and wanted to stay home and write the next book and the next book and the next book, so that I could immediately stop in the middle of the day and go do something for my parents if they were in bad health, that gave me the opportunity. So I had really the best of both worlds, the creation part of it, the creativity in creating the book, writing the book, and then training other people to present so I can go or they can go, whoever I want to send. And it met my goal to cherish the things that I value and to conquer the industry that says you can't do that. You can't have both. When I was starting out, people said women can't have both. You can't have a family and create this business. And I found that just not to be true. You just have to do it intentionally.
Okay, so talk about the intentional application of that, because when you're talking about doing those works and being present, and being on a plane flying anywhere, I'm like, what do you mean, Dianna? I mean, it's like, okay, did you say that? Okay, this is when I travel. This is when I don't. This is when I travel. I mean, how did you actually make it to where you could say I was present, but then I also did accomplish these things?
Yeah, there were a lot of practical things that I did, and I can give you some examples from other people, other professional speakers that I'm in touch with. For example, I know one speaker who says, I am not going to travel on the weekend. If I have to come back on Saturday morning, I'm going West Coast back to East Coast or whatever, I'm not accepting that speech, even though they've paid me a gazillion dollars and I'm supposed to be there on Friday. If I can't get back that night, I'm not going to do it. Other people put their family obligations on the calendar first. And even if they have to turn down a contract, a consulting contract, coaching contract, or whatever, if that's my daughter's cheerleading event, I'm going to be there, and you turn it down. So you have to set those things, I think, ahead of time on the schedule. I would look at the kids' calendars when I had kids at home and put their, end date, their spring break, all of these in-service days on my calendar to know I'm not booking those dates. You just have to set your mind to it, I think. And that's what I mean when I say it has to be intentional. And if there is a conflict, many times you may go beyond the boundaries that you've set, but I grant you, it will come back to haunt you. And I can give you a great example of that. I know I was set on the calendar when my daughter was in high school. She was up for cheerleader. And so when she did the tryouts, I wanted to be there. So if she didn't get it and she came home really upset, I would be at home that day. Well, what happened, though, is she was tied. They had one more spot left for her grade level. I think she was in freshman or sophomore at that point. And they rescheduled the tryouts, a runoff election, so to speak. And I was booked for that date. And I went ahead and did it because I didn't want to disappoint my client. And I remember calling home. My son answered the phone and I said, well, how did Lisa do? And he said she didn't get it. And she just broke. I could hear her bawling in the background. And I was saying, oh, no, I'm not here. This is the day I should be home. And I still thought about that. Decades later, I think about that terrible phone call that I was somewhere else and she was heartbroken and I wasn't there to comfort her. So I know the temptation is strong to step outside those boundaries and that framework we set, and we may do it. I have done it, but for the most part, I think I've tried to be intentional, and I encourage women to really think long and hard about not having that framework by just always being go, 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 rather than what's my model? What are my values? Am I really living my values?
And some people may also maybe not put that type of framework in place and say, well, I don't have kids, I don't have these obligations, I don't have. And what would you say to that? Where I could just go, 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 go.
I think then it becomes, what things do you want to be known for? Are you really advancing your career? Some people, even though they don't have responsibilities, caregiver responsibility at all, they have to ask themselves, do I want to destroy my health by working until I'm just so fatigued I can't enjoy when I have downtime? That might be another part of intentionality, that we decide, no, I'm not. I'm going to accept only this number of engagements. I will do, and again, I have friends who do this, and I did this for myself when I had my business before I sold it a few years ago. I would say, I'm going to do only X days a month. And when it exceeds that, I can't be healthy mentally and physically if I exceed that time. I'm going to have to pass those off to other trainers who work for me. So it really doesn't have anything to do with caregiving responsibilities. To me, it has to do with mindset. What are my goals? Mine were relationships. I wanted to be available for my family when they needed me. But it might be a financial goal. What is a reasonable, great living? And I don't want to kill myself going above that. I want to enjoy my life while I'm going through my life. I don't want to look back and say, gee, I've got millions in the bank, but I have not enjoyed what I did. And so people sometimes who are in that go-go mindset accept projects that bore them. I always wanted to choose projects that were intriguing to me. I turned down more than I accepted often because I think, no, my area of expertise is communication skills, and they're asking me to do something on project management. No, I wouldn't do an excellent job, and I don't want to go out and pretend to be an expert in an area that I'm not an expert in. So those, again, are mind things, not necessarily, and about intention, not necessarily about the activity that we're talking about.
Right. So what advice do you have for women when it comes to business relationships and networking, and how has this advice impacted you?
Well, I have a friend who talks a lot about relationship capital, and I think that's extremely important. I think that that's probably one of the biggest mistakes that I made early on in my career. I started out in my 20s, and I considered myself a high achiever. I wanted to do everything in a perfect way, and I wanted to accomplish a lot. And given the framework that I've already talked about, and when you do that, I've just forgotten your question, Jim. Can you go back and repeat your question? I'm sorry.
That's okay. I sure can. What advice do you have for women when it comes to business relationships and networking, and how has this advice impacted you?
Yes, that's where I was going with that, the relationship. Because I was always going this, and this on activities, many times I said, well, this luncheon can go. Well, I just don't need to go to that industry event. And I crossed those things out, thinking that gave me more time to accomplish my goal, write another book, market this book, etc. But really, as I said, that was a mistake, because we all need those people to give input to our life. When we have a critical decision, there are people that I can go back to that person and get advice. But if you haven't established that relationship, it can't be a give and take. It's always give me, and you're taking from them. So it has to be a two-way street that you build over a long period of time. Fortunately, I learned my lesson once I got into my late 30s. I decided, hey, relationships are extremely important. You do need to partner with other people. But I do still hold to the premise, network with meaning. And when you're going to things, sometimes I have to stop and ask, because, invitations galore. You get them in your email every day. And you have to think, what leads me further toward my goals? It's not just going and attending things and interacting with people to be interacting with people. Are these the people that I can influence and help? And are these the people that can influence me and help me? It's a two-way street. And if it's not something that improves or inspires or educates, then I pass it up.
Okay. So then what about the effectiveness? Okay. So what about the effectiveness of actually going through and actually, taking those proactive stances, saying, okay, I am going to invest in this. What are some of the things that you've learned along the way that's allowed you to be most successful?
Well, in addition to giving you mutual support at the time of need, someone to cry on their shoulder, they give you feedback, etc. I think it just helps you get known for what your expertise is. I know, even though you think, well, they can't give me business. Maybe you're an accountant and you're interacting with an attorney and you think, well, they're not going to come to me. They're already using another firm, etc. I don't think you should always think in that way, because there are opportunities for referrals. There are opportunities just to ask them for advice. There are opportunities that you can give advice. So I would say value the relationship for how it grows you and how it helps you serve other people. And if that doesn't materialize 5 years from now, it may materialize 15 years from now. And to give you an example, I've been serving on a nonprofit. Well, I serve on 3 nonprofit boards, but I'm serving on this one particular board with a person for 6 years. I didn't intend to get any business from him. He has a smaller business. I had no idea that he ever hires speakers. Well, after 6 years, he calls me up and says, I have this event. I'd like for you to come speak. So that happened because we had a long relationship. He respected my work on the board, and we got to know each other personally. And so then he had the confidence to say, I know you can solve our problem. I know we have an issue in our company, and you can solve it, because he'd seen me work in other areas. So it's a way to show off your expertise. And I mean that in the best sense, to show off. I don't mean in an arrogant way, but to demonstrate would be a better choice of words. It gives you an opportunity to just demonstrate your expertise and your integrity in front of other people, so that when it does matter long term or down the line, then they can come to your assistance, your aid, your support.
Okay. You talked and gave that story about the gentleman and talked about the whole arrogance and, being a little bit more, human-like.
Right.
You just even, self-corrected yourself to say that's not, I should use a different word. So I think it would be helpful to me, and as well as I'm sure to many others, when you start talking about the difference between arrogance and confidence and the perception and how all that fits, because it's kind of hit us twice within our time together.
Yes, I think the difference is not in your mindset as the communicator, but in the listener's mindset. You need confidence, and certainly people who are arrogant are self-confident. But I think what comes across is how you, even though you think it doesn't come across, is how you perceive the other people, how you perceive the group. In other words, if you're just telling a story and you said, oh, I hate to travel. I had the most horrible experience last week. I was on such and such an airline and this happened while I was in Paris, and the audience doesn't perceive you as, quote, bragging about being in Paris. They just are in the story with you because you're talking about a mistake or a decision you made or something terrible that you had to endure. But on the other hand, you will hear people who say, I was in Paris a couple of weeks ago. Most people don't have the opportunity to travel like I do. And you see how the disdain for the audience comes across in that kind of statement. So it's generally people can pick up on your attitude about them, not your attitude about yourself, because both a confident person and an arrogant person has a healthy confidence in themselves. But when it crosses over to feeling superior to the person you're talking to or the group you're talking to, that's when it comes across as arrogance. And most of the time that comes across in the topics you choose to talk about, and also in your phrasing. Like I illustrated there with the phrasing. I know most of you don't have the opportunity to travel the world like I do. That's a very arrogant statement. People don't identify with it, and they will realize you are putting them down in a certain way.
Gotcha. Thank you for that clarification. I think that's really helpful, because oftentimes we will loosely throw, some type of descriptive or some type of label or some type of judgment, and don't necessarily know the underlying meaning. And I always kind of jokingly say, like the word, ignorant or ignorance, it's vilified, to be an ignorant person. I mean, you don't want to be that person. But if you look up the definition, it just says innocent, unknowing.
Yes, like Will Rogers. Yeah, Will Rogers has a comment on that. We're all ignorant, only on different subjects.
Exactly. And I just didn't know what I didn't know. So it's really interesting how we can kind of shift the interpretation of certain things based off of whatever experience that we may be bringing to the table.
Enjoying the show? After joining Marina's Army, subscribe and share the Cherish and Conquer podcast on your favorite platform. Thank you. Now, back to the show.
Okay, so I want to make sure that we're actually going to go through our rapid fire process, and that's called our breakthrough blitz, because you've given us a wealth of information already, but I want to make sure we get some really quick and concise ones. So are you ready to actually help us with the breakthrough blitz?
Okay.
All right, here we go. So what's your favorite productivity tool or app?
I would say it has to be my phone. I live on my phone. I'm a caregiver for my parents, and so I do all my business on my phone, and I use probably every app on there.
And what's your favorite way to unwind after a busy day?
To sit down and watch a movie with my husband, or to read a book.
If you could have dinner with any female business leader, living or deceased, who would it be?
I think Jenny Romity, even though she's no longer the CEO of IBM, I think she had a great run, and I think she dealt with some challenges that many companies will never even have to face. And I would just love to talk with her about how she charted those courses.
What's your favorite quote or mantra that keeps you motivated?
I would think it's a verse in the Bible. It's be still and know. That's a verse from the Old Testament. But I tend to be a go person, do the next thing. And sometimes I have to remind myself, be still, enjoy the peace, and know that somebody else is in control. And my way of believing, it's God that is in control, as opposed to me, that I have to control everything. I have to get out of this situation. I have to, control this person's behavior, or I have to achieve these goals. To know that I can just be quiet and enjoy life.
So what is one piece of advice you'd give to aspiring female entrepreneurs?
Try. I think just try. Many people are stopped from achieving their goals because they do not, it intimidates them. It scares them. Somebody's told them they can't. I think you just have to try whatever it is.
And what's the biggest misconception people have about being a female entrepreneur, and how do you address it in your own experience?
I think that they think they cannot break through in an industry where there are a lot of men. In fact, when it's predominantly male. And I think that's just false. When I started my business back decades ago, I was the only female doing what I was doing. And my audience for speeches, for workshops, for even people who wanted books ghostwritten, it was 99% male. And you can make it. People will give you a chance to show what you do if you don't focus on that. If you don't focus on, I've got to prove myself, you just focus on, this is what I'm going to help you do.
Dianna Booher, how do the Cherish and Conquer podcast listeners and watchers get in touch with you?
They can go to my website, booherresearch.com, and that's BOOHER, just like boo her, except I hope they don't, booherresearch.com.
Dianna Booher, thank you for sharing your knowledge and wisdom, and we wish you the very best.
Thank you, Jim.
Thanks for tuning into the Cherish and Conquer podcast from Marina. Join our community of trailblazing women at community.marina.ai and get access to exclusive resources, checklists, and guides. If you found value in today's episode, please rate, review, subscribe, and share it across your social platforms. See you soon, and remember, barriers are for breaking.